Guten Abend und herzlich willkommen zum 27. Monday Night Stream aus der ACT-Galerie in Weimar. Heute ebenso herzlich willkommen in die zugeschalteten Funkhäuser von Radio Lotte und Bauhaus FM. Unser heutiger Gast ist Masimba Hwati, Künstler und erster Stipendiat der Radio Art Residency Weimar. Diese hat zum Ziel, unabhängige künstlerische Arbeit im Radiobereich zu fördern und zu realisieren. Sie nutzt dabei das Radio als Ausstellungsraum für Kunstwerke bis hin zum Echtzeitmedium und bietet eine Residenz, also eine Möglichkeit, hier zu leben und zu arbeiten, mit vielfältigen Gestaltungsmöglichkeiten für die eigene künstlerische Praxis. Diese Radio Art Residency ist ein Gemeinschaftsprojekt des Goethe-Instituts, des Lehrstuhls für Experimentelles Radio der Bauhaus-Universität Weimar und findet statt in Kooperation mit der Hochschule für Musik Franz Liszt, Deutschlandfunk Kultur, der Landesmedienanstalt Thüringen, der Galerie Eigenheim Weimar-Berlin, Radio Lotte und uns, der ACC-Galerie. Masimba Hwati ist seit April in Weimar und wird es noch sein bis Ende Juni. In dieser Zeit hat er viel erlebt, viel gemacht, unter anderem 2 Performances Ende Mai in der Galerie Eigenheim. Wir hatten ihn schon einmal zu Gast im Monday Night Stream Nummer 13, da war er noch zugeschaltet aus Wien. Heute haben wir ihn real und leibhaftig in der Galerie und freuen uns darüber sehr, nun zu erfahren, wie es ihm hier in Weimar gegangen ist. Er ist geboren 1982 in Harare, Simbabwe, hat viele Stationen künstlerischer Arbeit schon hinter sich, einen beachtlichen Weg. Er hat einen MFA der University of Michigan, Ann Arbor in Amerika, hat studiert anfänglich in Harare an der Polytechnic Art School, Bildhauerei und ist jetzt Doktorand der Akademie der Bildenden Künste in Wien. Er arbeitet mit Sound, Video, Performance und Skulptur, aber das werden wir noch im Detail erfahren, was genau er auch in seiner Arbeit hier in Weimar gemacht hat. Er wird interviewt oder in ein Gespräch verwickelt von Laura Ang-Tu-Dong. Sie ist Mülheimerin, an der Ruhr geboren, ist Radio- und Feature-Autorin und absolvierte einen Master in Medienkunst und Mediengestaltung am Lehrstuhl, eben diesem Lehrstuhl des Experimentellen Radios der Bauhaus-Universität und studierte auch obendrein vorher noch angewandte Musikwissenschaft und Musikpädagogik in Eichstätt. Das Gespräch wird in Englisch stattfinden. Ich hoffe, Sie sind alle vorbereitet und ich möchte jetzt an dieser Stelle herzlich danken und das Wort übergeben an Laura und Masimba. Very welcome. Hand over the word. So, just do the talk.
Also from our side and for the short introductions.
Thank you.
Yes. Also warm welcome from our side to the listeners on Radio Lotte and Bauhaus FM and also on the viewers on the YouTube live stream for today's like the 27th edition of the Monday night stream live from RTT Gallery, and I'm more than happy to be in conversation with you tonight, Masimba.
Thank you, Laura. I'm very pleased to be here.
Would you like to introduce yourself shortly in English, since we heard a short introduction in German already?
Great. So thank you to everybody again who has made it possible for me to be here for the past 2.5 months working on a project.
So welcome back. Everything is happening live here. We had some short technical issues, but thank you for your patience and for staying with us. Masimba was just about to say a few words about himself in English.
Right. Thank you very much, Laura. So I work at the intersections of various medium, currently chief of which is sound, but I have also worked over a long period of time in sculpture, performance, and some video and photography. I'm originally from Zimbabwe, and I'm currently a candidate at the PhD art practice program in Vienna. And yeah, I'm excited to be here and to talk about what I've been doing in Weimar.
So, how was like your first impression when you arrived in the city?
So I arrived at 4 a.m. It was cold, and I was sleepy, and walked from the bus stop, of course, because Weimar is a small city. Either you walk or you cycle. But I really liked just the slow pace of things. I could think, I could sit and contemplate on things. I could listen. I live very close to a park, so I think my first impression was very, very welcoming, I would say.
And how did you experience like the soundscape of the city in the early morning?
So it's quite amazing because I stay close to Elim Park, and I sleep very late. So early hours of the morning, I have the opportunity to listen, and I kind of get myself into this listening practice of listening to the kinds of birds and insects in the morning. And it's been an amazing way to start the day. And of course, I go back to sleep, but it's been amazing just listening. And I think Weimar is not so polluted sonically as other places that I've been. So that's a beautiful kind of background to start from.
Since you said before that you work from or come from the practice of working with sculpture and video, but listening also became a really important practice for you.
Right.
May I ask you, what was your first encounter in an artistic way with the medium of sound?
Thank you for the question. So my first encounter with sound was actually not audible. Funny enough, there are two people who I always think about, and these people are sculptors from Zimbabwe. One of them is Tapfuma Gutsa, and another one is the late Keston Beaton. So they were Keston Beaton was making instruments in his work. Tapfuma Gutsa is a very complex artist. He was experimenting with all kinds of things, including sound. I remember a work called Songs of the Rhino. It was a stone sculpture, but it had people whose mouth were open like they were singing in a chorus. So I was so fascinated by it, and I tried to listen to the sound, even though it was not audible. And from there, I think my work just started being preoccupied with the idea of sound. And as you know, sound is broad. Until such a time when I started actually activating the work to make sound. But I would say my first experience was not audible, but nevertheless sonic.
And it had an impact.
Yes,
on your artistic
very much,
practice right
very
now.
Very much, exactly.
Is this also how you came up with the idea of doing a performance and combining it with a sculpture here in Weimar?
Right, and you were part of one of the performances. I think if you remember, there was a part where I was waving a fly whisk in the air. I think the microphones were not really picking it, maybe a little bit. But for me, I think the idea was to sort of go back to that inaudible sound. What does an action do sonically, and what does an action provoke sonically? Some of these actions, even though they don't produce the sound, become very powerful. Sometimes sculptures don't need too much, sometimes they don't need too much mics, sometimes they don't need you to do too many things to them, sometimes just a little thing, and then it completes the cycle of sound.
Before talking too much, would you like to listen to an excerpt of your first performance, Pahasha, and then afterwards we talk about the title and also about the content of the work itself, so our listeners and also our viewers can get an impression of it.
Right.
Yereva pambe pfumi senditakawira iri kupi Yereva pambe pfumi sendichitepo iri kupi Yereva pambe pfumi yererayo kamunzwe zanu chiwororo yorwa ondoka yachimurenga kupetisa yachindunduma yererayo kamunzwe zanu chiwororo yorwa ondoka yachimurenga kupetisa yachindunduma puma wondo maiona yere vapambe pfumi wondo maiona yere vapambe pfumi yere baba yere vapambe pfumi maruza maruza vapambe pfumi maruza vapambe pfumi.
Bura Burangainaye Burangainaye
Nobody has ever seen it. They've only heard it. All the accounts that they've told me lack detail. There is a nebulous atmosphere around the description. But there's one story that my mother told me, and it comes close to describing this phenomenon. They all say it was big, though. They all said it was a giant. But they had to give it a name so as to understand it. And years later, that name found its place. Describing radio. They say that part of it was so sharp that it pierced the heart of the enemy and shook the enemy. Just the rumor of it shook the enemy and pierced the enemy that he got afraid. But there was also part of it that was an apparatus of care, an instrument of cleansing, of healing for the people. My mother describes the sounds and the voices that she heard. She tells me that as they were walking in the night, she started hearing the voices of school children walking on her right-hand side. But within that split second, she also heard those voices crawling on the back of the skin of her neck. Before even a second passed, she could hear their voices under her feet. The skin under her feet could hear the voices. She says she never heard it, she never saw it, but she heard it. But they all tell me that it is a giant phenomenon. Around 1975, my father was working in the mines in Shabani, digging out the gold for the colonizer. And they sent a radio broadcast looking for him because he was collaborating with the comrades. The colonial radio was so powerful that he was paralyzed with fear. He could not run. So he tells me that as he was sitting around the fire in the night, he was sitting on a wooden stool, and that stool made a sound because it was broken. And as he sat on that stool, he contemplated on his future that was coming to nothing very soon. And he tells me that at that very moment, the stool gave way to the weight of his body, and he fell backwards into the bush covered by the darkness of the leaves. And at that very moment, the soldiers came in and called his name, but he was nowhere to be found. He was saved by a fall. Baba makachengetwa.
We just listened to an excerpt of your first performance here in Weimar under the title Pahasha. And everyone who got curious now, I hope you got curious, can re-listen to the whole performance. We'll put a link on the website of RCC Gallery, and also you can find it on the website of the Radio Art Residency here in Weimar. Masimba Hwati is in Shona.
Right.
The language you speak and grew up with. What does it mean?
Right. So Pahasha is Shona, but currently it's being used more as street language than Shona. Same meaning, but different dynamics. So it literally means the place of anger, or a hotspot, or the place where chaos happens. And this is used to describe the chaotic situation of what we call the pirate taxis in Harare. Pirate taxis are semi-illegal transport operators. I mean, mostly illegal. Even if they are legal, they are doing something illegal. So there's always this chaos that characterizes those spaces. But those spaces are also very interesting spaces of just listening to culture, the kind of music that people are listening to, the kind of language they are speaking at that time, the kind of politics. So it's like the present day, I would call it an agora, a place where you get the latest news in the community, where the things happen. So the meaning can be extended to anything else, any other place whereby there is a lot of concentrated activity in a place. So I used that idea to sort of bring together field recordings from Harare, from that very same place, but also from the black market, and just try to see and to listen to the current state of the social politics in Zimbabwe.
Talking about places, do you see the black market as a place that the people make for themselves to take the place that they might not have elsewhere?
Right, correct. So the black market, the history of it started in Zimbabwe around 2003, maybe 2001, when the market became over-regulated by the government. So of course people cannot trade freely and they find other ways. So I think for me, this is improvised and guerrilla tactics of survival. People decide that we need to survive. So what do? They look for the cracks in the system. Mm-hmm. They look for the weaknesses in the system, and they occupy those gaps. So the black market is actually a direct result of the pressure that that is put on people economically, and they find something else. So it's very related to the kind of governance that we have right now, and the failure to maybe provide a level playing field for people.
And it's always a big decision, like to bring this also in an artistic work, right?
Right, yes.
How did you combine it with the radio? Like, where's the connection between
Right.
this black market
Yes.
and the radio?
I'm wondering the same. That's a good question. So for me, I think the connection is, so when I talk about radio, I am talking about radio in a particular time of Zimbabwean history, which is the liberation struggle, or the Second Chimurenga War of Liberation. So that is around 1964 up to 1979. So that is a specific kind of radio that I'm talking about. I rarely talk about modern day radio because I don't think that it does what radio then did. And during those years, radio was wartime radio, guerrilla radio, or pirate radio if you like. And it was broadcasting from outside of Zimbabwe into Zimbabwe. And the black market operates outside of the normal system, but it affects the system. So it's the same thing, but also with guerrilla radio that time. People would self-organize and they would discover the news about the war and how to support the war and how to survive in the war through radio. The same thing is happening right now on the black market. This is where people learn the current information. How do you trade your money? How do you make some profit? How do you make some living? You know, but it's not only money, but it's also about some essential services that can be found there or that converge there in that chaos.
So both are in a way like means of communication for
Right,
the people and connection.
Right, exactly.
And there is a name also in Shona for the radio,
Right.
which occurred first in 1930, I think, in Zimbabwe.
Right, around 1930, exactly. And Dzangaradzimu is this name. So if you look at the history, it used to be called, the name came from a kind of a giant spirit or a giant ghost that was found in Shona mythology or folklore. So this was a giant spirit that you look up and you don't see where the head is because it's so big, you know, and it just appeared and disappeared out of nowhere. So we grew up hearing these stories. But there was something interesting about the description of this big ghost. It was nebulous. We didn't know anything much about it. So in around 1930s, when radio came into Zimbabwe, the people were looking for a way to describe this science, you know, and they looked at something that is relatable to the community at that time, and it was this big spirit. I think the ability to occupy so much space in a very short time, but also disappear, you know. So I think the idea, because the word Dzangara itself means to spread out or to make broad, you know. Mm-hmm. So our ancestors were on point. What they were trying to do was describe a scientific term in their own terms. And later that name was inverted, and it became Dzangaradzimu, which is the name for radio, which is the Shona name for radio today.
So it's used until today?
It's used until today, not so much. Sometimes people use wireless, which is a Shonalized version of wireless radio. But if you want to sort of like go a little deeper into Shona, Dzangaradzimu is the name for radio.
What meaning does radio have today? When you said like it changed over the years, and you wouldn't say it's the same anymore, what meaning does radio have today in Zimbabwe? Well,
there is no way of talking about radio in Zimbabwe without talking about the politics. So what you have with radio is, I would personally call it captured medium so far. I mean, I am very aware of other community radio initiatives happening in Zimbabwe, and I've been part of those things. So I say this with consideration that there are other initiatives happening on the ground with community radio. But right now, radio serves the interest of the government, right? So it is, it appears to me more of a propaganda tool. I mean, this is in many places also, as a tool of propaganda than what it used to be back in the days during the liberation struggle. But of course, it depends on where you are standing. But I would say that it's a captured entity so far. It does the job like communication, but maybe it doesn't do as much as it did back in the days.
And what meaning does it have for you today and also here in Weimar with your work?
Okay, for me now I'm thinking of radio in more broader ways. I've been working with sound for a while, and radio now in a broader sense has become this medium where it's funny because I have a distance from the people, right? But at the same time, there's an accessibility there. I am used to live performance whereby you are in a room and you're sharing energy with people, right? With radio, it's a little different because of the distance between you and the audience, but also, ironically, the access to radio, like you can speak to somebody in Venezuela, So I think I'm rediscovering the power of radio and what could happen with my practice in terms of reaching people or talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a very nice thing. Like to rediscover this medium also like from another point of view, from coming from this like sculpturing and performance perspective, right. And also doing these nice performances on the radio where you have this intersection of like sound and movement of the body and also the politics combined in this topic. And maybe this leads us to the second performance that you did together with friends here in Weimar under the title thanks for the chance of being part of it, Bread Scores, Rituals in Guerrilla Radio and Breaking of Bread. We will come to the political aspect of the breaking of bread after listening to a short excerpt of this performance now.
Top echelon in the room. I'm not worried, but I'm dying to see a change that in the system. That's all. I would like to see the young people enjoying together, black, white, enjoying together. Now, help. This girl, oh, sad. This is me. Yes,
breaking of bread was just an excerpt of the performance we just listened to. And we're really sorry for any inconvenience because of our video stream and that you might have had like a stop motion experimental video. But again, you can rewatch and re-listen to the whole performance online. Bread Scores is a title that already reveals a lot and does not, if you don't know about what happened. Maybe we can describe a little bit. We were broadcasting or performing live in Galerie Eigenheim here in Weimar, which is also one of the cooperation partners of the Radio Art Residency. And it was a group of people sitting in a circle. Around what actually?
Around a space.
Around a space.
There was some sand, a little bit of sand in the middle. Yeah, and lots of microphones around, different instruments. I think we just asked people to bring whatever instrument they were comfortable with. So I remember we had the Gayalaya, and we had the Lira, and we had Mvoko from Mozambique. Komaluka, one of my friends, brought that. And we also had Mbira. What else did we have?
An organ.
Yes,
that was there
beautiful,
already.
Beautiful, yeah.
Some self-made instruments.
Self-made instrument, percussion. We had also had hair clippers. If I remember well.
And you built an instrument as well.
Yes, I had a couple of instruments that are works in progress, which are my sculptures, which could be activated. One of them was a trumpet that was on skateboard wheels, and that had grip tape that made some sound when you touched it. And one of them was a combination of a broom and a spear, but also it had a string. So you could play it using the ball. So the idea comes from a series of events during the liberation struggle when the leaders of the struggle, or the political leaders, were incarcerated by the colonial government. So they were basically cut off from society, cut off from their loved ones, cut off from activity, any political and social activity. So this is how you destabilize a movement. You just take the leaders and imprison them. But their loved ones, during the prison visits, they brought them loaves of bread, but they smuggled transistor radios inside the bread, you know, and spare batteries, and handwritten notes and newspaper cuttings, so as to connect the people who were inside to the outside. So again, you see, we have a situation whereby somebody who is from outside of an entity is influencing an entity from the outside. Another example of the poetics of guerrilla thinking or guerrilla warfare. So in the end, you know, I decided to celebrate this poetic idea of resistance, you know, where you have people who are trying to negotiate a system, and they're thinking and saying, so what can we do? You know, this situation is impossible. What can we do? And I created graphic scores, and then Laura baked the bread for us, and we had the scores inside the pieces of bread. And if our viewers and our listeners, when they get onto the performance, they can hear the sound of the bread breaking as the artists were opening the score, the bread, and taking the scores and playing it. So I think I personally had a very, very beautiful experience from the breaking of the bread, just that symbolic act, but also the sound of it, you know, and then taking out the score and then improvising with the score. I think it was an amazing experience for me to see other people doing it, do it, but also to do it with other people.
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing this experience also, and the breaking of bread
My
has
pleasure.
also like a really symbolic, it's really
Right.
symbolic also
Right.
in history and
Right.
different
Right.
histories,
Cultures.
generations,
Yes.
cultures.
Yes. Yes.
And it was a way to connect the performing people, since we
Right.
only had one rehearsal.
We only had one rehearsal, and I think it's important to also know that we were still in lockdown. We are still in lockdown. So we got tested. Everybody got tested. We maintained distance, but it was just a refreshing way of coming together. You know, I think most people would agree that 2020 and 2021 are difficult years. You know, we cannot get together. We are separated from the people we love, and we cannot access each other the way we used to. And just that symbolic act of being together with other people in a room in a safe way, playing together and improvising, was just like a beautiful register of humanity, I think.
It was a really beautiful experience, I think, for all of us.
Right.
But you see the breaking of bread and the hiding of scores as
Yes.
a political act as well.
It is a political act. It was a political act then, you know. But I think it's even a political act now, because in so many places around the world, I can only talk of Zimbabwe, but this is common in every place where you have oppressive systems. People will always find small ways in which they can get together, or they can communicate needs to each other. This is the same thing with guerrilla radio. This is the same thing with the black market. It's just a sign that people are looking for space. People are looking for space to be together and just to be to have healthy relations again. So I think it is political. It was and it is now.
Do you feel it as a responsibility for you as an artist also to give these people a platform?
So I am part of these people too.
Yeah.
I think my practice is growing into being with people. You know, I've been performing and making work as a single artist. You know, of course, I have a lot of help, but I am beginning to think more of being with people together. And I think the place of coming together and being in a common space is also political, you know, because you begin to self-organize, you begin to decide. So I think for me, the responsibility that I have as an artist, I do not want to impose this on everybody. I think it is to be able to provide space for people. It could be mental space for people to think, to get together, but it could also be a physical space for people to come together, self-organize, find ways. So, yeah, I think my work is developing towards that more than ever in this part of my practice.
And you're also working now on a piece for
Right.
Deutschlandfunk
Right.
Kultur.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about it already? Or
Yes.
how much can you reveal?
Yes, we can talk about it. So this is a 50-minute piece, and it's basically a composition that is made up. The bulk of it is made up of archival material from the wartime radio in Zimbabwe. We had 2 radio stations that were broadcasting Voice of Revolution in Zambia and Voice of Zimbabwe in Mozambique. So I have some archival material from these radio stations during that time. But I also have field recordings of the black market and the flea market in Zimbabwe. And I think my job right now is to work as a composer and find a way to bring these things together and make them speak to each other. But also I think at the center of the idea is to to be able to create a space whereby it will be visible or audible that these two sources of information, the black market and wartime radio, actually come from the same desire, to be together, and the same desire to be free, and the same desire to find space for us and our friends and our loved ones.
So it's like, as you call it in German, a roter Faden, a string that goes through your work. This desire of connection and the intersection also of language and different times and histories.
Yes.
Yeah, and as well we will have you, luckily, in Weimar.
My pleasure.
For another, almost month.
Less than that.
Less than a month. Or you have been here 2.5 months already. You will be here a little bit longer, and maybe you'll come back in the future as well.
I hope so very much. There is still a lot of things to explore in Weimar, and a lot of collaborations to be made, and hopefully at that time maybe our situation would be better, our corona situation. So
was it hard for you to meet people and get to know people also for this collaborations during this time here?
I would say yes, but I would also say that it's a little different from other places that I've been before. I'll give an example of Florida, where I was, and I was trying to work on a performance with people. It never happened because we were in the eye of the storm. We were in the, if I can say, pahasha of the pandemic. So we couldn't do anything. So Weimar is apparently doing better than most places. So of course, we had to be careful. It's not easy to get people together, but it was possible, and I really I am grateful for that.
So speaking about Weimar, you are the first artist in residence in this Radio Art Residency here in Weimar, which is actually existing since 2018, and it was in Halle before, and now it came to Weimar since this year, and there's also an open call running. It's running until the 30th of June. You can apply for this period for the autumn period from the 15th of September until the 15th of December, and all the information are online, also on the website of the Radio Art Residence. And Masimba, you will still be here. There are some events happening in Weimar also. There will be the Kultursymposium on Wednesday, right? And you will be in conversation with Tina Klatte.
Yes.
What will we be hearing, or what can we look forward to?
So with Tina, I will be doing a briefing of my time here too, and maybe going a little deeper into the process of how I was working and how I worked on the pieces that I did here, and also just some background from where I'm coming from, and the meaning of radio, and maybe some future plans of what the future looks like for me with the medium of radio.
That's very exciting. It's going to be also maybe about memory and heritage. Right, and who actually writes history, and how can it be written? What are forms of anti-racist and post-colonial memory? And how history writing works in family and a personal level. This is what the description says on the website.
Deep questions.
Really deep questions. I'm happy I don't have to answer these questions, at least. Kultursymposium Weimar has this description on their website. What are your plans for the rest of your stay in Weimar, apart from doing the piece? Are you having, exploring maybe another city, or I heard there might be a trip to Leipzig?
Yes, indeed. Leipzig is on the cards soon. Maybe Berlin again. and then after that back to Vienna.
So you also have, for the people in Berlin, you have an exhibition.
There is an exhibition right now running in Berlin, but it is just like evidence of the performance. The videos are playing in Berlin right now, and all of the things that we used and I used for the performance are on show in Berlin right now at Eigenheim Gallery.
And what will you experience in Leipzig? Do you have like places to go to?
Not really. I think we are going to play it by ear, but I hear that there are interesting places to listen to radio pieces or sound pieces there. I would love to explore that.
Then I would say thank you for this insight into your work.
It's my pleasure.
And also
I'm happy to be here.
Happy to have you here. Looking forward to the works and to the upcoming broadcasts also on Deutschlandfunk Kultur, your piece. I'm really curious about this. I think the audience is curious about this as well. And we have some minutes left, and we thought maybe we could leave you also with like another teaser from the performance, like either Brett Scores or Pahasha, I'm sorry,
yes.
To dive into and explore a little bit more until you'll be able to listen to it in full length.
Mazua zuru zinasere neshano. Mazua zuru zinasere. Sere. Mazua zuru zinasere neshano. Mazua zuru zinasere. Sere, sere, sere. Hanondida. Hey